What's your full name?
Lambert Joseph Perina.
And when were you born?
I was born 8 miles south of a little town called Clarkson, Nebraska, and it was just on a farmstead because that's where my folks were living at the time.
What's your birth date?
My birthday is June 25th, 1922.
Okay. Today is March 11th, 12th, 11th, 24. And so you're coming up on 102 in a few months.
That's right.
And so born outside or near Clarkson,
Yes.
Nebraska. And how many in your family? Tell me about them.
I had one older sister, not quite 5 years older than I was. She was, her birthday was December 25th. And so she was just about 6 months younger than, 4.5 years older than I was.
Okay.
Yeah. My father was a farm laborer, and my mother was just a housewife during that period of time.
Okay. Kind of tell me about growing up there. What was it like?
Well, I only spent 6 months in this area, and then my parents bought an 80-acre farm, which was about 15 miles northwest of where I was born. And they moved onto the 80-acre acreage in, I guess it was in March of 1922. And it probably took them all day to get there because it was like 30 miles total distance, and had no trucks or anything at that time. It was all horse-drawn vehicles and wagons, and so that would have taken all day to get there from where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And we did reside on that 80 acres. My father finally sold it in 1960, and so he lived there during that period of time. Of course, I grew up on the 80-acre farm, and when I got to be old enough to do chores, I did chores, slopping the hogs or milking cows or whatever else needed to be done. We did not get a automobile until 1927, so the first 5 years of my life were horse and buggy, and that was the way we traveled. We went to buy groceries in a town about 10 miles further northwest called Madison, Nebraska, and we didn't go more than about once every 2 weeks or maybe once a month. It would depend on whether or not we were short on our staple foods like sugar, flour, and salt. Mm-hmm. That's the staples that we normally spend money on. All the rest of it, like meat, we had chickens, and we butchered chickens, and we had hogs, we had cattle, we normally didn't butcher cattle because we sold those for money to buy the staples, staple food. But we normally butchered a hog once a year. And of course, in those days, the women were really very sharp on how to cook and preserve food because we had no refrigerators, anything else. So Mom would go ahead and boil the meat and render the lard. And while the lard, well, she would put the meat that she cut up into either 1 quart glass jars or 2 quart glass jars, and then fill the rest of the glassware with, I'll call it rendering lard, because that was the preservative. And then we carried those down to the cellar, which we call the cellar, or the cave, and that was below ground, and the average temperature year-round was around 40 to 45 degrees, so that all of the food that we took down there would be preserved. And that's what we ate during the year. We, of course, grew a large garden full of vegetables. Of course, the staple food was potatoes and eggs that the hens laid. And so that's basically the food that we lived on for the first at least 20 years of my life. I spent some time, of course, doing chores. And then when we got the automobile, which was a 1927 Chevrolet sedan, allowed us to go back to Clarkson to church. Before that, we had church services around the kitchen table because we'd never make it to Clarkson with horses in a wagon or buggy and back during the day. It'd take all day. So we did the church and the Bible readings on Sunday morning at home. When we got the car, of course, that gave us an opportunity to do the church visitation and the services. And that was kind of a great deal for me because I kind of enjoyed going, and there were other kids that I could associate with. And our church was a Presbyterian church, but had an unusual thing that transpired during the early 20s and early 30s in the church. The men and the boys sat on one side of the church in the pews, and the women and the girls would sit on the other side. And I can't remember, it was probably in the late 30s that we finally worshiped as a family. And that was unusual, but that's the way they did it in those days. And I did, of course, get my, took catechism training when I was in 1936. And in 1937, I was actually taken into the church as a member. Although I was baptized in 1922, we weren't considered members of the church until we went through catechism training.
Okay.
And so after that, of course, backing up a little bit, I went to country grade school, which was not kindergarten. We didn't have kindergarten. We had first grade through eighth grade. And so the first 8 grades were in the country school. And in 1936, I started high school, graduating in May of 1939. And in 1939, early during the summer, I was asked by my uncle to come and graze cattle out on the road because there was grass on the roadside in the ditches, and but the 1930s that we lived through were drought years, and almost from 1930 and 31 through late 1938, we had hardly any crops, and everything dried up. Winds would come up at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. And we also experienced the Dust Bowl in 1930s, and we'd get red dust from Oklahoma, and that's unbelievable, but that's the only place that they had red soil, so everybody said that's where it had to come from Oklahoma. And we managed to live through that during the 30s. In 36 was probably the worst year. We had temperatures in the high 119 to 120, 121, and it just burned up the crops. We have hardly any moisture, no rain, and once in a while we'd see what appeared to be a cloud show up on the horizon, but it kept getting closer and closer, and by the time it got to us, it was, you could call them locusts, we call them grasshoppers. They were winged grasshoppers, and they would fly from one place to another and devour all the vegetation in sight. We also had fence posts made of like apple orchard or apple trees or cherry trees, and you wouldn't believe it, but the grasshoppers ate the posts that were made from the trees.
Wow.
And just devoured them. And it was kind of unusual because if you would watch them, their saliva that they used to soften up the wood was black. And they'd moisten the wood and then chew on it and eat it. And they just devoured those fence posts. Now, some of the fence posts that we had were creosote treated, and of course they avoided those. But they ate everything in sight. One good thing, I guess, that happened was that it gave our chicken flock something to eat. And of course, the hens lay the eggs, and a hen will probably lay only one egg a day, but we sometimes had eggs 3 times a day for our meals because we had nothing else beside that. And Mom would bake the bread, homemade bread, of course, and so that's what we survived on in the 30s. So, this is in 39, after I had worked for my uncle herding his cattle out on the road, I had enough money counted up to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, to Lincoln School of Commerce, which was a school that had shorthand and typing and usual office work, some area of doing work with figures, but accounting was not their major strength. It was just shorthand and typing, office work. Because I had envisioned that I would apply for a job with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C. after I graduated. Well, halfway through, of course, World War II showed up in December 7th of 1941, and I was only about halfway through my School of Commerce course. And when I graduated in April, I did get a job with a construction company that was working on building or rebuilding Lincoln Airport, making it a Lincoln Air Force Base.
Okay.
And that's where the bombers would marshal out of Lincoln. They did their training there. Early on, they had the B-17s, and later on, they had the B-29s, of course. But I knew that when World War II broke out, that eventually I would be in the draft to go to the Army or some service. And so I was passing the Lincoln, Nebraska post office, and they had this big poster out there in front of the door saying, "Be a Naval Aviation Cadet." Well, it was very intriguing because I thought, that's what I want to do. Even as a kid in grade school, I had an interest in flying. And so I walked in and I got the information, and then I saw the recruiter, Navy recruiter, and he said, "I'll take the written test and we'll see where we go from there." Well, I was in my height of glory when they told me I passed the exam, the written exam, and they would schedule me for a medical exam in Kansas City, Missouri. Why they couldn't do it locally, I don't have any idea, but that's the way they did it in those days. And So I started thinking about my future at that point, and the possibility of maybe getting into the air branch of the Navy, and I only had to pass my physical, and I went to Kansas City about a month later that they called me down there, and and I was a skinny kid, and I weighed 5 pounds less than the minimum acceptable entry level. But the recruiter was very nice. He said, I'll tell you what, you go out and get 5 pounds of bananas. You eat those 5 pounds of bananas, gorge yourself on as much water as you can, and then come back and we'll weigh you. And it worked. I passed like with an extra pound or two to spare, but that made me eligible to enlist officially. But that didn't happen until August 17th. There was a delay in the paperwork between the time that I took the physical exams and so forth before they called me up to actually enlist me. Mm-hmm. And that was done in Kansas City also. And I enlisted, and the first bit of training that I would go through would be what they call civilian pilot training at the local airport of Norfolk, Nebraska, which is 35 miles away from where I lived on the farm. And there was a delay in my orders from August until December 1st. But I finally did get called, and I spent 2 months in Norfolk doing ground school and then flight training in the J3 Cub and J4 Cub. And it was under a real pioneer, Andy Risser, who used to be a barnstormer. He did airmail service, did some charter flying work. And anyway, he was well known there and actually expanded the Norfolk airport. And they finally had the long runways and so forth that they built there. But we landed on grass runways, and I spent the 2 months there, and I forget, I got around 30, 35 hours of flight time and soloing, which made me eligible to go to the Navy's pre-flight school. Well, the Navy had sent about 14 of us to Norfolk for the preliminary CPT training. 13 of the 14 of us were sent to Ottumwa, Iowa for pre-flight school. I don't know why I was singled out, but I was the only one that didn't get orders to go to pre-flight school at that time. And I never know why. They just must have mislaid my paperwork someplace. But anyway, finally, they did send me home under orders to wait further orders, which I did. February rolled around, and I still hadn't heard. And March rolled around, and I finally decided, well, I'll give Kansas City recruiter a call and see if they have an information. It's, well, your orders are underway. You're to report early May to San Francisco, California, pre-flight school, and it was at the University of there, and the Navy had taken over part of the college because with all the kids, both men and women, enlisting into these services, the college was pretty weak on membership. So that worked out pretty good, and I spent almost 6 months in what they call pre-flight school, and was trained in all kinds of various things. One, we got trained in celestial navigation. That's navigation by the stars, and then we also got trained in recognition, not only of our own ships and airplanes, but all of the enemies, both German as well as Japanese, and I always figured if I ever got through recognizing everything that I should in the 1/10 of a second that they flash the image on the screen, I'd be lucky. Somehow or other, I managed to pass that phase of it, which I consider was the hardest, along with Morse code. We had a tap out at least 13 words a minute in Morse code, and we had to pass that in order to be eligible to go on to training. But fortunately, I did make it through there, and in early fall, in the winter, I got sent to Pasco, Washington, which was a primary aviation base, and we flew the N2S Stearman, which was the bi-wing airplane, and of course open cockpits, and I spent most of the fall and the spring. So during the winter, we had these fur-lined trousers and jackets that we'd put on and sit in the open air cockpit and fly the N2S. And it was cold because Pasco, Washington got down below 0 too during that time, but managed to get through that training. And of course, the Stearman was all fabric coated on the wings and the fuselage. And one time on a solo flight, they had one runway closed that was directly into the wind, so we had to land on a crosswind runway. And crosswind landings in an N2S is not easy because the bottom wing was fairly close. It's only about 2 feet above the ground level.
Yeah.
Well, the wind picked up one wing, and I scraped the runway and put about a 50-cent piece bruise onto the lower part of the wing. Well, the investigative people were really up in arms about that. But it was only a little bit, and all they had to do was patch it, which they did. But they made a big deal of it. But fortunately, they didn't wash me out, as the term goes. But I got through that. And then in about March of 43, I went to Corpus Christi, Texas, and we went through the basic instrument training there, and then into what they call advanced training in the SNJ Texans. We flew a lot of gunnery missions, and so we got a lot of what they called final training in the N2S, or in the
T6?
in the SNJ.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
SNG.
Texan, yeah. And I graduated on March 15th, 1944, and was sent to Jacksonville, Florida, for operational training. We didn't know what we were going to fly for sure. We heard it was the Corsair, and the Corsair, of course, was kind of unusual because it had that inverted gull wing, and we were told that it was a high-performance airplane with 2,800 horsepower, and it had a long nose that it was hard to see over, especially when you were on the ground taxiing. And tongue-in-cheek, we believed a little bit of it, but in reality, that's what it was. When we got there, we got the ground school and the Corsair, and then we did get the flight training, and they were right. It was a nice airplane to fly in the air, but on takeoff and on landings, it was kind of suicidal, if you want to put it that way. A lot of pilots had trouble, especially on takeoff, because with the tremendous horsepower, the 2,800 horsepower engine would develop about 2,000 or 2,100 RPM. And the initial Corsairs came out with a small tail surface, so that when you took off, you usually took off pushing right rudder to compensate the tendency to roll. But even so, sometimes it was difficult maneuvering and keeping the straight level takeoff. And a few of the pilots had trouble, and they rolled and spun in, but I don't know, I guess I was lucky. I managed to get the job done, and we put in enough hours to get ready for assignment to a overseas squadron. I got through with this Jacksonville training in the summer of 44, and went to or got assigned to MWSS-9 in Cherry Point, North Carolina. MWSS-9 was Marine Wing Service Squadron, which basically meant you're assigned to this by name, but you have no airplanes to fly. You're sitting here until you get an assignment to an active squadron. And so all of us that got assigned to that particular MWSS-9 sat there for most of the summer into early fall. And then finally we heard that there was going to be a new photo reconnaissance squadron and that's going to be developed at Greenville, North Carolina, which was kind of a sub-airport of Cherry Point. But anyway, we had the opportunity to say yay or nay, and we all decided we're going to get out of WSS-9 and go, because it gave us an opportunity to get involved in, again, aircraft that were assigned to oversee, and they were combat type airplanes. And so I did get assigned to initially what they called heavier than air photo reconnaissance squadron 354, and I spent 30 days with them. And since they had just come back from overseas, they looked at me and said, "Oh, we're going to assign you to the other squadron that's being organized, called 954, still photo reconnaissance." So I got reassigned to VMD 954. They were flying the F-6F Hellcats, and we had cameras in the belly portion of the airplane. We had one 24-inch camera shooting downward, and we had 6-inch aerial cameras shooting out of each side. And so that's what we would do our photo reconnaissance work with. And so we started training, and we got all set to go overseas in just late spring of 45. And lo and behold, the government decided to give us new airplanes. And they gave us the F-7F Tiger Cat. It was a twin-engine airplane. Still had our 2,800 engines in it, which developed 2,000 horsepower on each engine. And we were blessed with what they called a photo version, and they had a photo nose on it, which was right in front of you, and the engine's, of course, out there. But we could carry a lot of cameras in that nose section, and from low altitude, what they call the Sony camera, to all kinds of other cameras, aerial cameras, including the 24-inch one. So that was a real good deal, and but that delayed our training again for about another 45 days. We had to learn how to fly the airplane. We had to learn new techniques with the cameras, and we did. We finally got through in July of '45, and got orders to go overseas. We didn't know exactly where, but eventually we were told that we'd go to a small airfield on Okinawa, and they told us we'd be in on the final push into Japan. We'd be the photo reconnaissance people that would fly in ahead of time, take pictures, bring them back, and give the ground troops a better idea on where to make landing, amphibious landings, and all that. So we were all set for that, and we loaded our F-7F Tiger Cats onto a Jeep carrier, which was just a small aircraft carrier, but they used that for transporting airplanes to the islands, and we ended up in Hawaii and then to Guam with the Jeep carrier. We offloaded the airplanes in Guam and spent 2 days getting them ready for the 600-mile overwater trip to Okinawa. Of course, none of the airplanes that we had at that time were equipped for overwater travel. All we had was bare compass that we used for navigation, so we never got too far away from the base. And when we got word that we were going to go to Okinawa, over 600 mile or over all that water, we said, that's a 6-hour trip at least, and how are we going to have enough fuel to go? Well, we ended up with about 900 gallons of fuel in external tanks, all of the internal fuel, and so we're all set to go. And they said, well, for navigation purposes to Okinawa, you're going to follow a B-24. They're the only ones that got enough equipment to navigate and lead you the way over there. But make sure that all your tanks are siphoning properly so that if they're not, you can get back to Guam. And well, fortunately, all of the squadron airplanes did have the ability to transfer fuel, and so we were on our way for about a 6.5 hour over the ocean, saw nothing but water all the way to Okinawa, and so we landed at Shimu Field on Okinawa, which was a coral runway strip, and that's where we operated out of for a whole year. When we were on our way to Okinawa, of course, they dropped the 2 A-bombs, and they were pretty sure that the war was over, but not taking anything for granted. They thought that we might still be utilized in case Japan decided to do other things after they signed the armistice, but fortunately they didn't. But what do? Well, we sent 4 plane echelons into Tsingtao, China, and at that time, South Korea, in Seoul, South Korea. And we mapped everything from all the coastline from Shanghai, China, all the way up towards the Russian border, then back down along the west coast of Korea, then up the east coast all the way. And we thought we were just kind of boring holes, and who was ever going to use these photo reconnaissance pictures? Well, when Korea War broke out, those are some of the pictures and maps that they used of Incheon and Wonsan Harbor, some of the areas that they made amphibious landings. Mm-hmm. And when I heard about that, that made me feel pretty good that we didn't just bore holes during the end of World War II. Those photographs were really important usage during the early parts of the Korean War. Yeah. And so I spent all the way up until about February or early March in Shimu Field, and got orders back to the States, and got back to my folks' farm in April of 1946. At that time, I was sent back as a reservist, and they gave me an opportunity to tie in with some squadrons that were being organized on a reserve basis, and most of them were too far away. I'd never make it on a weekend, especially from the northeastern part of Nebraska. Yeah. So I waited, and then eventually they organized a squadron at Lincoln, Nebraska. And I was going to college at that time, picking up my bachelor's degree in vocational education. And when the squadron was organized, I immediately joined them because it was another way of making some extra money for college expenses. It also gave me an opportunity to stay proficient in piloting. Mm-hmm. And so that was great. We, of course, trained 1 weekend a month. The term Weekend Warriors came about, and that's what we were, 1 weekend a month. And then a 2-week period that we got called to active duty during the summertime to really brush us up on flying and everything else. So that worked out good. I stayed with the Lincoln Squadron throughout the time that I was at the University of Nebraska, and after I graduated in 1950 with a Bachelor of Science degree in vocational agriculture, which in simple terms was I was a VOAG instructor in a high school environment, grade 9 through 12, working with boys for the most part that had or were living on the farm, had projects of their own, like they had their own maybe a sow, or they had their own cattle that they were could consider that they owned and were raising. So the WWII program inspired this type of activity for them. And I spent February 12th of 1952, while I was still teaching class vocational ag in Clarkson, Nebraska High School. I had all four grades, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I had 50-some students. They were all farm boys, and so they all had farm projects, and so that was part of the vocational ag program, and that was what my teaching was all about. And like I said, on February 12th of 1952, I got, having stayed in the reserves, I got recalled for active duty during the Korean War, and I got my initial assignment to Olathe, Kansas Naval Air Station, and I was assigned as a SNJ or AT-6 Texan instructor pilot for pilots that had been in World War II but had gotten out and had not flown at all in any reserve program, but were now recalled to active duty because they were what they called inactive reserve status, but they needed pilots, and so they were being recalled. And so I was instructor pilot for about 3 months at Olathe, Kansas. And when we got through for all the ones that they got recalled in our general geographic location, then there were no more reason for us to be there. So I got individual orders to go to Cherry Point, North Carolina, to join VMJ 3 at Cherry Point. That was still a photo recon squadron, but they were transitioning to jets, and so I got instruction in flying the two-place airplane, training airplane, and then the main airplane that we flew, the F-2H-2 Banshee, was a twin-engine jet airplane, of course, single place, so you just crawled in the airplane after you got some ground school and cranked it up, and off you went. And you had always had a chase pilot the first 10 hours in case you ran into trouble and so forth. But everything went along smoothly, and I did flying in the F-2H, did some photo recon work, training-wise. And then there was a opportunity that came up to the squadron for somebody to attend photo school in Pensacola, Florida. Oddly enough, I, as a reserve, figured I'd never have the opportunity to go, but the offer was extended to all the pilots in the squadron who were regular, what we call regulars, and none of them wanted the assignment. So the CO asked me if I was interested. I said, of course. And so I went down to Pensacola, Florida for about 6 months into all phases of photo work. Not only aerial reconnaissance, but also photos, stationary photos, portrait photos, you name it, we did it at that time. And fortunately, I was jet qualified, and the school had gotten about 4 F-9F Grumman airplanes that were equipped with photo reconnaissance cameras. Nobody would fly them. So there was only one other individual and I that had jet experience. So we had 4 airplanes, and the 2 of us, and we flew a lot of missions, training missions, because airplanes were available and we were available. So it was a lot of fun. And after we got through with that training, we had an option. We could either go back to Cherry Point, to our original squadron point, or we could join another photo recon squadron in Miami, Florida. And not having been to Miami, I said, sure. I had a family. I had my 2 sons and a wife and that. But we went from Pensacola to Miami, and I flew with the squadron down, the training squadron in Miami, and that lasted till about mid-August, when I got individual orders to replace somebody in VMJ-1 in K3 in Korea. So, I left. I took the family back to Nebraska and got them settled back into the house where we had when I taught school there. And we had never sold the house, but we kept it, and fortunately it was empty, and they could move right back in. And that's what they did. And then I went overseas to Korea, and K3 was up from Busan, about 100 miles along Wonsan Harbor. We had an airstrip there, and so I spent about 13 months over in Korea, and finally got back to Nebraska, released from active duty in September of 1955. No. Yeah. 55. And no, it was 54. Early 54 that I got back. And, but it was September, and of course too late to get a teaching job, a vocational ag in any of the schools, because they were all filled up by then. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I might as well go to college and the University of Nebraska and pick up my master's degree, and which I did, and graduated in June of '55. On June 1st or thereabouts, back up. In the meantime, while I was going to college, I didn't know if I was going to go back to teaching or not for sure. So I applied for a position with the Civil Aeronautics Administration, and it's now called the Federal Aviation Agency. But I applied for a position there, and I did get notified that I would be entered on duty on June 1st, 1955, into an air traffic control position at the Sioux Falls, South Dakota Combined Station and Tower. And I was to report there by June 1st. Well, I wasn't going to graduate from college until the 15th. So I asked, or I called Kansas City and said, could I delay until after graduation? No problem. So they delayed my the job entry until, I think, June 20th, which didn't give me very much time between the 15th and the 20th to get from home, pack up, and go up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and try and find a place to live and all that. But we did it. We got the job done, and so I spent about a year and a half in training and got my journeyman controller certification, and I was able to stand watches alone in the control tower. And of course, being a newcomer, you obviously got the midnight to 8 o'clock shift. But that's the way it went. And I spent just a few weeks doing that when a personnel manager from Kansas City regional office came up and said, well, your name came across our desk, and we have a position in personnel that can utilize your aviation background, your communication skills, your college degree, and would you consider coming down to Kansas City and work in the regional office as a personnel specialist? I said, well, I'll have to check with my wife and see that the kids were just about ready to go to school, and we said, yeah, we'll do that, because the kids were growing up, and it gave us opportunity for some family time that I probably wouldn't have had if I'd have stayed as a air traffic controller. But I did. I spent almost 24 years in the Kansas City area, and some was back in the Air Traffic Control Division, and some was where I started in the personnel office. So I did a lot of dual purpose work while I was in Kansas City. And we went through a lot of reorganizations fortunately, I was able to stay in the Kansas City area, and from there, I retired back to Clarkson because that's kind of where my wife was from originally, and of course, being growing up south of town, why it just worked out, and we did that, and her parents gave us about an acre of land right there on the outskirts of town, and we built a house there, and I retired from Federal Aviation Administration in 1979 and came back to Clarkson, and of course immediately I got jumped to help out in a lot of areas because you're retired, you don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, both my wife and I were so tied up that we hardly ever had an opportunity to even get out of town, let alone go on a lengthy vacation of any kind. And yeah, I had about 35 assignments to various organizations. I always ended up being the president because they said, well, you got all the experience, you might as well be the president. And yeah, I was adjutant quartermaster for my VFW post for over 25, well, about 25 years. And also tied up with the American Legion, and I was on the school board for 3 years, and we decided, or I should say, as a school board and the community decided they needed extra room. So we had a building project going on. There was a building committee that got selected. Yeah, guess who? I got selected as president of that also. We built a Olympic-size gymnasium and 7 classrooms as an addition to the current high school, and it was over a year in the developmental stage because I was kind of a shyster, I guess. I wouldn't buy off on anything that didn't sound right to me, even though the teachers came up with a plan. I said, no, go back to the drawing board and come up with real reasons why you want this or something else. And so they did. And we put the plan together, presented it to the patrons of the school district, and it went sailing through on the first vote, which was hardly ever done. But we had everything done lock, stock, and barrel. We had all the details covered. We answered all of the questions that they had, and so it just went out on the first vote. And that made me happy because I felt that maybe I'd done my job of working with the right people and getting everything organized the way I thought it ought to be in order to get the the project passed for the first time. Because a lot of schools went through this situation, and they'd have to go through 3 or 4 voting times before they got it passed. And they could never understand why we sailed through all the first time. So anyway, that was pretty much all the things that I got involved in. When I came back to town, I'll back up to 1980. We came back in 79 and started finishing up our house that was being built. We did the painting and the woodworking, varnishing and stuff. But the local grocery store had a fellow working in the grocery aspect of it, stocking shelves and all that. And unfortunately, he had a heart attack and he passed away. Well, the owner of the store came by immediately and said, "Will you fill in until I can find somebody to replace you?" I said, "Well, yeah, okay, I'll do it." 13 years later, I'm still there. So he didn't look very hard to find somebody. But anyway,
On top of everything else.
I've had a very varied life, and I have enjoyed everything I've done. Sometimes I've felt that I neglected my family a little bit, especially with the reserve flying that I was doing. But it was extra money that came in handy, and I guess they did suffer too tremendously. But that's about it.
Well, that's wonderful. You made it easy for me. I didn't have to ask you much of anything. You just you answered everything as you went along.
The only thing you didn't say is you retired from the military as a colonel.
Yeah, that's that. I was going to get to that. What was your ranking?
Well, while I was in the Olathe VFW, in the Olathe fighter squadrons, we had jets, and of course we flew lots of different airplanes, but one year we had 2 squadrons on the field, both reserve. Washington came through and decided that they were going to decommission the other squadron. But not immediately. They phased it out for during the year, so it'd still be in operation for 1 year. They were reluctant to select somebody as commanding officer of that squadron on a temporary basis like that. Mm-hmm. So a 2-star general came by and asked me if I would be willing to be commanding officer simultaneously of both squadrons, which meant that I would have to drill not only once a month, but twice a month, being CO of both